I thought I could just sort of dance my way into the hearts of the French. And instead, I encountered some pretty rude behavior, and I didn't understand it.
Robert Redford once quipped that he believed he could dance his way into the hearts of the French, only to be greeted with disdain, bitchiness, and no assistance with the language. It was one of the rare instances in his own long career when charm alone was not enough to win the room. Now, at 88, Redford has let on something else that charm couldn't repair: his experiences with some of Hollywood's largest names. For decades, he remained quiet, preserving his image as the industry's cool, collected gentleman. But in his later years, he's talked about the actors who made his life on set complicated ego, style, and temper clashes that made legendary productions private battlegrounds. These are not rumors. They're his own words. And some of the names will shock you. Gene Hackman. When Robert Redford and Gene Hackman first collaborated on Downhill Racer, 1969, their status couldn't have been more polarized. Hackman had just shocked the nation in Bonnie and Clyde, establishing himself as a hot-headed force to be reckoned with. Redford, on the other hand, was Hollywood's golden boy, basking in the success of Barefoot in the Park and on the verge of immortalizing his superstardom with Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. Redford personally promoted Downhill Racer, adamant to make a real skiing movie. Even after sustaining a severe knee injury in a snowmobile crash, he refused to let anyone else do much of the skiing. Hackman, acting as tough coach, was outraged. "Does that fool know anything about insurance liabilities?" he growled. For Hackman, Redford's risk-taking was not commitment, it was foolhardiness. For Redford, Hackman's hothead and perpetual bickering with crew were draining. Hackman, at one point, even refused to vacate his trailer due to a lighting selection until Redford called him out personally. "This isn't your movie, Gene. It's a team effort. Show up or step aside." Although they completed the movie, the tension never dissipated. Both actors never considered collaborating again. "Some pairing only need to happen once," Redford would later state. Dustin Hoffman. Redford and Dustin Hoffman were the ideal pair on screen in All the President's Men, 1976. Off-screen, it was otherwise. Redford was a believer in preparation and accuracy. Hoffman lived for improvisation, altering lines and actions as he went along. What viewers perceived as natural chemistry was often a cover for frequent behind-scenes battle of technique. Redford viewed acting as architecture, painstakingly planned and built. Hoffman viewed it as jazz, loose, spontaneous, and capricious. To Redford, the outcome was chaos. For Hoffman, it was liberation. Despite their on-screen performances becoming iconic, the experience exhausted Redford. They did not get together again to make another film. James Woods. James Woods is renowned for intensity, but on Ordinary People, 1980, that intensity conflicted with Redford, not as co-star, but as director. Redford, directing for first time, needed quiet authority and subtlety. Woods, in a small yet essential role, insisted on more dynamic choices, harder edges, and endless argument over direction. Disequilibrium developed rapidly. Woods resented Redford's measured, deliberate pace, finding it too controlling. Redford, for his part, felt disrupted and combative by Woods. Although the film won Best Picture and opened the directing door for Redford, he never employed Woods again. In private, he referred to him as too much energy in the wrong direction. Tom Cruise. By the time Redford met Tom Cruise, their images were a universe apart. Redford was the old master of contemplative, character-driven movies. Cruise was the poster boy for blockbuster spectacle. Redford admired Cruise's professionalism, but abhorred what he perceived as a corporate mindset in filmmaking, branding, image control, and franchise development at the expense of artistry. Where Redford saw movies as a means to convey truth, he felt Cruise treated them like products. Although they never openly feuded, Redford stood at arm's length. "It's not a partnership I ever needed," he once stated. Faye Dunaway. Robert Redford is never a man to get noise confused with depth. His approach, on and off camera, has always been one of precision, economy, and faith in those you're working with. He thinks that a set should be like a finely tuned orchestra. every musician in harmony, the conductor-director, and the actors co-moving toward the same truth. Faye Dunaway was a whole different tool. At the time 3 days of The Condor started production in 1975, the casting seemed like ideal chemistry. Redford was riding high, box office gold, and a reputation for unflappable professionalism. Dunaway had just completed Chinatown, admired as one of the most compelling actresses of her era. On paper, it was dynamite. On location, it was cold steel. Dunaway arrived furiously devoted to her method. She queried lines, requested rewrites the evening before it was time to shoot, and insisted on Daly's review. Lighting setups hours, previously approved, were occasionally torn down at her behest. Her crew informs that she rehearsed each scene as if she were heading off to war, never hesitating to confront anybody, director, co-star, or cameraman, if she thought something was not correct. In the beginning, Redford stood back. He'd learned across decades that there were rhythms to actors, but the never-ending halts, restarts, and arguments started making the shoot into a daily negotiation. "We're here to discover truth," he explained to a script supervisor while taking a break. "Not micromanage every syllable into submission." Their contrast was marked. Redford appreciated instinct and spontaneity. Dunaway analyzed every moment with surgical precision. A scene only had a few lines, but she requested several retakes, adjusting the inflection by increments. By the fourth reset, Redford grumbled under his breath, "We're not assembling a watch here." The breaking point occurred behind closed doors with director Sidney Pollack. Dunaway was quibbling about the emotional rationality of her character during a critical scene. Redford sat in silence, initially but soon interrupted. "It's espionage, Faye, not Chekhov." The room fell silent. Dunaway left without comment. She showed up the following day, as if nothing were amiss, but the atmosphere never recrystallized. While the movie called for an undercurrent of intimacy, there was no on-camera warmth. For some insert shots after Dunaway finished shooting, Redford allegedly asked for a body double. Asked later about her, Redford produced only a thin smile and 2 words: "She's unforgettable." He never worked with her again. No reunion panels, no joint interviews, no wistful recountings of their days on Condor. "She wasn't difficult because she cared," said one crew member. "She was difficult because she didn't trust anyone, not even him." Redford himself once referred to her as a storm in heels. And storms, as he well knows, leave a mark long after they've blown over. Paul Newman. Robert Redford and Paul Newman were for many the very epitome of Hollywood partnership, Butch and Sundance, best friends in charm and cool, lightning in a bottle. But behind the grins and the mutual screen legend, Redford attests the truth was much less glamorous. He was charming, Redford conceded years later, but he always maintained some distance, and he played dumb at times to get away with more than he should have. It wasn't a tabloid feud. No outbursts, no public insults. What they had was more subtle, more insidious, the gradual undermining of trust. Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, their first film together, was a pleasure. Easy, warm, based on laughter and long days spent under the desert sun. Newman's easy charm was the perfect foil to Redford's introspective intensity. They were inseparable on and off screen. By the time they reunited for the Sting 4 years later, something had shifted. Newman came to the set with more clout, arriving at meetings flanked by studio executives armed with notes on scripts, casting, even camera placement. Redford, more interested in the art than the politics, felt himself pushed to the sidelines. "He stopped being my co-star," Redford later confided, "and started being my competition." One member of the crew put it bluntly, "It stopped being 2 guys making a movie. It became a chess match between stars." The transformation wasn't only professional, but personal. Redford was a fan of Newman's talent, but was resentful about the way that Newman was treated by the public and media as the heart of their collaboration. Reporters would ask Newman a question first. Headlines relied on Newman's name. "Paul was the face," Redford once stated, "and I was the footnote." Newman never commented publicly on the shift, but privately he apparently regarded Redford as being very serious about the work, perhaps too serious, and not the business of it. To Newman, dealing with the studio was part of the job. To Redford, it was a distraction from the work itself. Following the sting, reunion offers came in. Scripts were pitched, studios offered up huge budgets, but nothing ever materialized. Redford would graciously smile and say, timing wasn't right publicly. Those around him knew the real story. Timing wasn't the issue. Trust was. There was no dramatic falling out. No one argument to finger. Just two men who, contrary to the legend, simply refused to answer the phone for each other again. The years saw civil meetings, homage, benefit galas, the occasional photo shoot, but never another movie. They never rekindled that early magic. He was charming, Redford repeated in later years, but he always kept a distance. Now, the legacy of Redford and Newman remains suspended in those two classic movies. For viewers, they will forever be the ideal couple. For Redford, however, the reality was more nuanced, a testament to how, even in Hollywood's greatest duos, the chemistry on the big screen can mask an infinitely colder truth off of it. Number 7, Robert Duvall. Robert Redford and Robert Duvall, two giants of the American screen, both possessing their own particular brand of greatness, ought to have made a marriage made in heaven. On paper, The Natural in 1984 was a dream team. Redford as the iconic Roy Hobbs, Duvall as the world-weary sports writer Max Mercy. But things were not quite so smooth in reality. From the first day on set, it was clear they were playing two different games. Redford approached the film like a symphony, every movement rehearsed, every note intentional. He'd spent weeks fine-tuning his body language, calibrating every glance, every pause. Duvall, by contrast, was pure improvisation. He came without notes, without rehearsal script, with a fundamental conviction that the greatest acting was instinctual, not prepared. Redford was impressed at first by the immediacy. Duvall's Max Mercy was charged, volatile, lived-in, magnetic. But unpredictability is a double-edged sword. Duvall continued to rewrite lines in the makeup chair, shift the rhythm of scenes at random, and give wildly divergent tones from take to take. Patience gave way to frustration for Redford. They were both brilliant, one member of the crew remembered, but they weren't making the same movie. The actual break occurred over a critical confrontation scene. Redford sought a certain emotional moment, one that directly served an overall arc he and director Barry Levinson had spent time crafting. Duvall had no interest in arcs other than his own. In between shots, he interjected sarcastic ad-libs, deflating the tension Redford required. Redford halted the scene, turned to him, and matter-of-factly said, "It's not your movie." Duvall did not flinch. "It's not anybody's until it's real," he shot back. Then came 15 minutes of acrimonious argument that escalated in a quiet way while cameras remained unused. It was like seeing a campfire become a forest fire, a sound tech described it. Crew members stepped back. Levinson finally intervened to broker a resolution, and the scene stumbled to its end. Following the shoot, Redford was questioned on working alongside Duvall. His reply was curt, "He's brilliant, but I don't need to go through that again." Duvall never made a comment, but the silence did the job. They were never in the same room again, not for press jaunts, not for retrospectives. There were second collaboration offers and then counteroffers that fizzled out, but neither man wished to recreate the dynamic. Redford encapsulated the situation years afterward. Duvall wanted to play jazz. I wanted to play composition. It wasn't music. It was noise. Today, their respect for one another's abilities is as strong as ever, but the working relationship is stuck in time, defined by that one volatile project. No tantrum in the tabloids, no public bashing, just two masters of the craft who knew they'd never work on the same set again. Ultimately, Robert Redford's roll call of 7 actors he disliked working with proves that even Hollywood stars have their limits. From Gene Hackman's unpredictability to Dustin Hoffman's volatility, James Woods' battles, Tom Cruise's corporate mentality, Faye Dunaway's need for perfection, Newman's silent competitiveness, and Robert Duvall's anarchic battles. Which of them surprised you the most? And would any of these two be able